I am Amy. I need your help. Please listen to my story. Our vacation rental was adjacent to the eastern gate of the Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park, Colorado. Staring out the window towards the mountains, I anxiously mulled over the possibles for my next submission to Scare Times magazine. It was Devil's Night, merely 2 weeks before due date, and my notebook was completely blank. I couldn't recall having writer's block this much in my early years. Writing stories during those times was stress-free and done mostly at leisure. Today, knowing a mortgage payment depended on whether or not I delivered added to the challenge. I shut my eyes and attempt to clear my mind. I could see the contour of the mountains brightly imposed on the not quite jet black background inside my eyelids. A reminder that your brain doesn't shut off the moment it's denied light. And that's it. Here I was in this mountain town on this glorious night, and in its epicenter sat a bright white shining beacon that's capable to scratch the itch of any horror fanatic, the Stanley Hotel. It is not only the place where our beloved Stephen King woke from a dream that ignited his best-selling novel, but it also possesses a robust history, as well as extensive reports of haunted activity. If this wasn't enough to fuel the non-existent bonfire in my head, then I don't know what would. So that's the plan. Tomorrow, on Halloween Day, we'd make our way to the hotel grounds. First up, I'd hit the hedge maze located in front of the hotel. 6 years ago, our first trip to Colorado, the hedges were young, barely higher than my shins. I didn't anticipate we'd have time for a second visit this time around, so I was even more excited to see if they'd made it as high as my head. It would make for a more challenging walk if anything. My husband Michael and I would have to go first thing in the morning. This would give me ample time to soak in the experience without much disturbance from tourists scurrying about. Plus, we'd planned our last day to be our scenic mountain drive as a wind down before boarding the plane to home. That night, lying in bed, pleased with the newly derived plan, I realized it was the first night in weeks I felt the weight of responsibility starting to lift. It didn't take long to fall asleep. We both awoke early the next morning. We brewed coffee, grabbed our belongings, packed up the car, and headed to town. Upon pulling into the hotel parking lot, Michael decided he was going to hang back to let my creative brain do what it needed to do. Besides, structures that were presumably haunted weren't his cup of tea. That one fateful night we stayed in room 217, the most coveted haunted room. He had the most restless night of sleep he had ever had, including waking twice in a panic-stricken state. He had no desire to enter the building again. He walked with me as far as the hedge maze, then found a seat on the veranda until it was time to leave. I paused at the entrance and whispered a silent prayer for inspiration to find me among the rows. I engulfed every sight and sound. I was delighted to see the hedges had made it as high as my head, enough to evoke nervousness of not finding my way out. Of course I would, though, especially since it's rather small, merely for show. "All right, Wendy," I muttered to myself. "Are you doing this or not?" I chuckled at the thought of Jack Torrance actually standing over my shoulder, egging me on in that snarky tone. "Well, I'm not Wendy, it's Amy, and I couldn't be any more ready," I barked back to Jack in my mind, gripping my notebook tightly. I stepped in. As my feet shuffled along the path, I listened to the gravel under my soles. Crunch, crunch, crunch. How quiet it was at this hour. The cool mountain breeze swiftly blew past my cheek, lightly lifting a strand of curls that rested on my shoulder. I smelled the strong scent of hedges, but a lighter scent from the ones that were browned and slowly dying. I marveled at the sprinkle of the season strewn about. A pumpkin on one side, gourds on the other, orange and yellow mums hanging in baskets, and strands of light that would not be lit up until sundown. It was classy. Thoroughly enjoying the experience now, I decided to play a little game with myself. I was Danny now, carefully memorizing every twist and turn, should my mentally deranged father decide to come swinging a bat at my head. I love my morbid thoughts. I sensed I had reached the center. In fact, I proved it to myself by standing on my toes, peeking over the hedges to see the hotel centered in my view. I scanned the windows aimlessly, first right, then left, when my gaze unexpectedly locked on one from the second floor. I could make out a figure, seemingly staring down at me. In less than a blink, it pulled back. It startled me, and I tripped over a pumpkin beside me. As I plunged into the hedges, I startled a black-billed magpie nesting inside. It shot up in a flurry of feathers. I stood up to collect myself. A strong breeze suddenly picked up. Things fell silent, and I don't mean substantially quiet. I mean as if my ears had been set on mute. Tree branches swayed, but couldn't hear them creaking. A flag flapped feverishly, but no snapping of nylon. I could see Michael on the veranda conversing with a tourist, but their voices didn't carry. Amy, I heard a voice beckoning me. Michael? I couldn't help but call out, knowing quite well it couldn't possibly be him. But who else knows my name? Then a sharp, Amy! A hand touches my back. I whip around. It's Michael. I stood staring at him, frozen in disbelief. What are you doing? He asked sternly. I finally blinked. You've been standing in this spot for over 20 minutes. If you're planning to hit up the inside, you better get moving. We need to head out real soon. Okay. Sure, I replied in a shaky tone, too embarrassed to admit I must have zoned out. Michael turned and walked away. I looked down at the open notebook in my hand. Something was drawn on the page. I took a closer look. It was strange. I must have done it, but I couldn't picture myself doing it. What the hell was it? It looked almost like half of a staircase leading into a ceiling. I snapped the book shut. There was no time to delve. I shook it off and caught up to Michael. I followed him up the stairs to the veranda, watched while he sat back down, and made my way to the inside lobby. It was stunning as I remembered, but unsurprisingly, perfectly adorned with holiday decor. Right in front of me was that grand, inviting staircase that screamed, "Come up." Of course, I couldn't resist, although walking up this time would be unnerving, as I was not officially a room renter. It was unlikely they allowed just anyone to roam past the rooms in the upstairs hallways. I saw the concierge turn her back to straighten out a pile of room keys. I would make a break for it. Should she see me, I would play innocent. I began my ascent. She paid me no mind going about her business. Step after step I went, steadily focused on the first landing. The massive windows flooded the stairs with light, momentarily blinding me. I made it safely to the first landing, then moved swiftly past the vintage portraits and mirrors that flooded the walls. I made it to the second landing without a hitch. I was home free, but not out of the woods. No one up here could decipher whether I was a renter or not, but if I were going to reach room 217, time was wearing thin. Lobby hours were now in effect, and if someone was renting that room, they could start the checkout process any moment, interrupting my progress. I turned right, heading down the corridor. Up ahead were a set of glass French doors. One was slightly ajar. This was to my advantage, as I didn't have to struggle with a knob making any additional sounds. I slipped right through. A door swung open on my right as a cleaning service employee stepped into the hallway. I kept going, as if I owned the place, nodded to her and kept walking. She closed the door behind her and headed the opposite way and headed downstairs. I was completely alone. It wasn't long now before I made that final left turn at the end of the corridor to reach the end goal. But no. I saw someone dart toward the room from the adjacent hallway. Darn, someone is vacating it, and rightfully I can't disturb them. However, I told myself I made it this far, and maybe they were from another room. I should at least check it out. Then just before I turned the corner, I heard a female voice say, "I saw you coming." I made the turn. A woman in a light flowered dress stood there facing me. She was positioned slightly off-center on the right-hand side of the hallway. Her hair was tied up in 2 ponytails, one on either side, and her right hand seemed to be gripping something, but it was nothing, just air. "Are you staying in 217? How lucky you are!" She turned down her chin and stared, slowly sizing me up, her head tilting awkwardly to the side. "Yes, I am a lucky one," she replied, straightening herself back up. "It has been a while. Would you like a tour?" Bingo. I was not expecting this at all. I'd only hoped to make it as far as the door, and at best, snap a picture or two. I had to be reminded of what was inside now. It felt so long ago. I couldn't remember details, like the pattern of a rug, or ornate carvings on furniture. Something in there had to be worthy of writing about, and I was about to rediscover it. She led me in. I instantly felt at home, the bookshelf displaying King novels, evident that this was the room where he himself had stayed. I looked at the oversized, classically styled bed and ran my hand across the linens as I walked across to the window with draperies and the draperies that added vintage flair. I looked out and down upon the hedge maze. I was surprised to see it was still pretty empty, except a girl that was staring up at me. She wore the exact colored blouse as I was wearing. It couldn't be. I was pulled back forcefully by the woman. "You don't need to pay any mind to that now." Her hand was ice cold. I could feel it penetrate my blouse. Her hold on me was intense. I felt the energy drain from my body. No strength left to unlock her grip. "Come with me now." "Where?" I gasped, barely producing a sound. She led me toward the forsaken bathroom. I knew what was in there, what was waiting for me. We entered. She led me straight to the tub that was filled with a murky substance. She fixed me with her gaze, and I became mesmerized, unable to turn away. "I waited for you all these years. You look like her. I watched you both lying in bed during the night, but he kept waking up as if to protect you. I couldn't take you then. I wasn't a good girl in life. My sister was. After we were drowned by the hands of our father, only she was allowed to go back home. You will be my sister now." She lifted me into the tub, gently placing me into the unbearably cold substance until I was covered up to my chin. Hopelessness consumed me. It was of no use to fight. She pushed down on my head and I sank further and further into the dark abyss. With every ounce of my being, I let out a scream, "Michael!" But the door, already in motion, shut before any sound escaped. "Where is she?" "We're not going to have any time if she doesn't come outside now," grumbled Michael. He got up from his seat and went inside to the front desk. "Have you seen a woman inside in a light blue blouse, holding a black notebook?" "She went up," replied the concierge, and pointed to the staircase. He knew she couldn't resist going up there. It wouldn't be long before he'd find her now. He knew she was by that room. He made his way up to the second landing without a single stop. As he turned right, two women in flowered dresses, holding hands, brushed past his shoulder. "Oh, excuse me," he pardoned, but they were too distracted to pay him any mind. He quickly proceeded toward the glass French doors, down the long stretch of hallway, made the left at the end, and faced room 217. The door was halfway open. "Amy?" No answer. He approached the door and pushed it completely open. On the floor was a black notebook, opened with a pen laying on top. Horrified, realizing it was Amy's, he picked up and read what was scribbled on the page. "She's perfect." Michael screamed, ran back down the hall, down the stairs to the front desk, and called the police. I heard Michael's scream, but I was powerless, no longer in existence on this earthly plane. We continued seamlessly down the corridor and up 2 more flights. We approached a set of stairs, only a half set that led to the ceiling, the access completely sealed. She held my hand as we ascended up the stairs, through the ceiling, then vanishing from sight. I'm leaving these final words and hope they find you. This is my story that I couldn't see writing itself all along. I'm not sure what I am, but I can tell you I'm a residual now, repeating the same turn of events every hour, on Halloween Day, every year. I fail every time to warn myself, and Michael doesn't notice me. If you ever find yourself at the Stanley Hotel on Halloween, would you come help me?